Carl Olson. How in the heck did you find me, by the way?
Friedman Adventures.
Oh,
well, I originally.
And how did you bump into Friedman Adventures? You're an avid fisherman still, or not?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Long range.
Oh, really?
Mostly.
Yeah.
Although I've been doing a lot of stuff out of here during the winter just to get days on the ocean on the native sun and pursuit and all that kind of stuff. I actually worked as a deckhand on sport fishing boats here at 22nd Street Landing in 1958,
oh my goodness.
59.
You're 78 years old. You look fantastic.
Well, thank you.
You do.
I appreciate
Can I
that.
tell you, man?
My dad lived to 97.
Uh-huh.
And my mom lived to 91, would have lived a lot longer, but when my dad passed away, she just shut down.
Yeah.
Which I guess is pretty
common.
Yeah.
And, yeah, when you've been together for so many years, right?
So I'm truly the benefit of a good gene pool to start with.
Yeah.
And I try to take care of myself and stay active.
You were just telling me the story about watching the Desiree Rodriguez podcast and what an effect that had. It had an effect on all of us. I mean, Carl, I saw it coming. I knew it was coming, and it still hit me.
Oh man, it was a broadside like nothing I've ever experienced on a podcast, or for that matter, movies, or I mean. Really? Yeah, I mean, because I identified so much with the situation. I've been at sea all my life.
Yeah.
I worked as a pinhead and a deckhand. I spent 5 years on active duty in the Coast Guard, so
wow.
I've seen a lot of things.
Yeah.
Not many of them that turned out well.
Yeah.
And so when that happened, I mean, I could place myself in that situation and understand what was going down and how frantic it had to have been for those guys and everything. And it's like, wow. And I eventually was able to gear back up and start it again and see their reaction and hear the rest of the story. And then the follow-up was great too with the family and all of that.
Right, yeah, that was
good
nice
stuff. Originally though, I found you just online in some chat room on the internet.
I hope it wasn't I hope it was a nice chat.
It was a nice chat.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. And you had mentioned Barney Barnes.
Yes.
And the fact that you had evidently worked with him at Redondo Sport Fishing.
Yeah, and that's the reason why you wanted to get together today to talk about Barney, who's one of my favorite guys, Hewlett Barnes, right?
Russell Hewlett Barnes.
There you go.
Yeah. To those of us who knew him, Russell Hewlett, to the rest of the world, it was just Barney.
That's right.
Yeah, and what a great guy.
Yeah.
But you answered a few questions for me at that time because I contacted you online. I don't think we had a telephone conversation. I think you just responded in fact, email.
I think I saw your email late. I mean, I think you sent it to Friedman Adventures, and I have so many different... I got to it late. When I saw it, I just felt bad. I felt bad that I hadn't reached back out to you quick enough.
I didn't expect an immediate response. I didn't expect any response at all because I wasn't sure whether you even want to talk about it.
Oh, heck yeah. Anybody who reaches out to me, I always respond.
You did tell me a long time ago, when I first found you on the internet, long before Friedman Adventures, about how he had remarried and that his wife had been of some means and enabled him to buy some boats. And
was he married when you knew him?
Yeah.
Do you remember his wife's name?
Lee.
Okay, so I didn't know Lee.
Okay.
By the time I met him, he was married to Edie Barnes.
Okay.
And Edie had some money, it seemed like, because we'd go to her house and, they had all kinds of money, and he wasn't rolling in it running the Redondo Special. And, every time something would break down or something, he'd say, I'm going to have to ask Edie, God darn it, It's too funny. I'm sure... is nice a guy, but he had a few meltdowns. Did you ever see a meltdown?
Oh, absolutely. And when he was married to his first wife, Lee, it was mutual meltdown.
Oh, they were going at it?
Oh,
She'd come down to the boat or what?
She was feisty.
Uh-oh.
I mean, she was a feisty critter. She was a little short, had short black hair, and she did not put up with any of his BS at all.
Oh, my God. So she gave Barney a run for his money?
Absolutely. And, of course, that'd get him fired up. I remember one time, I'll go through the chronology of how I worked with him. But I want to get to one point. When we were fishing on a boat called the Raymond B off of Belmont Pier over in Long Beach, we had to moor at a mooring away from the pier, and then he and I would take a little skiff that had a little 5 horsepower outboard motor and motor out to the boat, put the skiff on the mooring, drive the boat back and load the passengers and go fishing, and then reverse the process on the way back.
Yeah, this is the Redondo Special, or is this?
No, this was the Raymond B.
Okay.
Which is another story altogether. But Lee just happened to be up on the pier, and what happened was one morning, I think she brought him down there because she needed to use their car to do some shopping or something. So, and he would always come by and pick me up first in San Pedro where I lived, and he lived right up here at the top of the hill in the house. So he'd come by, pick me up, and she'd drive us over every once in a while to Belmont Pier, and then we'd go down. Well, we got in the skiff this one time, and he couldn't get the motor started, and the wind was blowing. So now we got to row out to the boat, to the mooring. And now we're taking on water.
Oh, God.
And I'm rowing and he's bailing, and Lee is up on the pier going, you know you're going to die. You know you are. You're going to drown that kid with you. And he's,
are you scared, or you're invincible when you're 14 years old?
You're kidding me.
You're immortal, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Nothing can hurt me, especially when I'm with Barney.
No, right.
What could possibly go wrong? But yeah, it was a great story.
That's hilarious. And so obviously you made it.
Yeah. It was an interesting day to say the least, but we made it, and made it through a lot more than that. I'll start with the chronology.
Yeah.
My father was a hardcore fisherman at every level.
Yeah.
Started me out with crappie and bluegill at Big Bear Lake and stuff like that, and then we graduated to the high Sierras, trout fishing in streams and lakes up there. But he took me out on a half-day boat to the Horseshoe Kelp one day.
You remember the boat by any chance?
I don't.
Okay.
I don't remember the boat. But the barracuda were biting, and they were nice log barracuda.
Yeah, big ones, right?
And even though the stuff I was fishing with was an old bamboo rod and some kind of a knuckle buster reel or whatever, because he had the late model Penn monofilament number 25 with real monofilament.
Yeah.
But I managed to hook and land a couple of barracuda, and that was it.
You were hooked.
That was it.
I know.
It was over.
I know the exact feeling.
Not only was I hooked on deep sea sport fishing, but I lost all interest in trout or anything else that looked like bait.
Me too.
You know.
I went through the same thing.
So, we came back from that trip, and at that time I was 12 years old.
Yeah.
This was 1956. Barney was running a boat called the Valencia 3.
I remember him talking about that.
Out of Norm's Landing.
Yeah.
Which was thriving at that time. It had a lot of boats. This was
I remember that.
4 a.m. boat.
Yeah.
So I told my dad when we got back from that half-day trip, man, I want to do something more than this. And of course, he had to go back to work. So on a weekday, probably a Monday or Tuesday, he loaned me his good gear.
Yeah.
And I went down and bought a ticket and got on the Valencia 3. And we went to Catalina Island, and we fished for miscellaneous stuff over there.
This is circa what year?
1956.
Okay.
And I caught a nice big sheephead, had no idea what the heck it was, but I caught a yellowtail, about a 15-pound yellowtail.
That's a nice yellowtail.
20-pound test monofilament.
Very nice.
And I was just, I dragged that fish from Norm's Landing up to my house between 10th and 11th Street on Grand Avenue. It was so dead and baked.
And Carl, that's because I know what you're talking about. Nobody's cleaning my fish because I've got to show this thing to my parents and my friends, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And of course, you couldn't fillet fish on those boats at that time anyway.
Yeah.
You could only gut and gill them. So, on the way back from Catalina Island, there was a door leading to a very steep ladder going up to the wheelhouse.
To the captain's quarters.
Captain's quarters. And I just cracked the door open, just curiosity to see what was going on. And Barney was up there driving back from Catalina to San Pedro. And he said, "Hey, you interested in this stuff that's going on here?" And I said, yeah. I said, "This is only my second time deep sea fishing, and I'm just soaking up everything I can get into." You know?
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, come on up. There's room for 2 of us up here." I said, "Really?" "Yeah, come on up." So I did. I climbed up there, and man, I'm just,
in heaven.
In heaven.
Yeah, right.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
He could not have been more friendly, answered all of my stupid questions, provided me with some information that I wasn't even aware that I needed, and asked how interested I was in this whole deep sea sport fishing thing. And I said, man, I'm hooked.
I'm hooked.
This is it.
Yeah.
You know, this is what I want to do.
Yeah.
And he said, do you know what a pinhead is? And I said, no, I don't.
I heard that coming, by the way.
I don't have any idea. He said, pinhead is a young person who aspires to be a deckhand or maybe even eventually a captain that wants to start right at the bottom, doing all the dirty work, the worst of the worst. And a pinhead's only compensation on this boat is breakfast and a cheeseburger.
And a free fishing trip.
Well, you may get to do a little fishing.
Oh, right. Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
But you may not.
Yeah, that's right.
And certainly when the fishing gets good, then you're going to be busy gaffing fish and untangling lines and whatever. And I'll teach you all of that if you're interested. Well, I had a job, of all things, as a locker room attendant at the Gaffey Street Municipal Plunge up here.
Oh, be darned.
A job that my father had arranged through a friend of his that worked for the city of Los Angeles. And I told him, I got this job already that I work like 4 days a week. And he said, well, what kind of notice would you have to give? And I said, probably a week, I don't know. He said, well, if you're interested, I'll be happy to put you to work as a pinhead on the Valencia 3.
Wow.
I said, man,
you walked off of there walking on
there.
cloud
I went home,
nine.
I told my dad. My dad called his friend at the city, said, we'll need about 2 days to find a replacement for you up at the plunge.
Your dad was supportive of you doing this?
Totally.
Yeah.
Now, bear in mind, I'm 12 years old.
Yeah.
I live between 10th and 11th Street on Grand Avenue up here. That's easily almost 2 miles from Norm's Landing.
Yeah.
And I'm going to go to work on a boat that departs at 4 a.m. So that means I got to leave the house and walk through the worst part of San Pedro, Beacon Street, all the bars and red light
Right at the time all the drunks are coming out of the bars too, right?
You figured that one out on me, yeah. And all my dad said is, be aware of your surroundings. Keep an eye out. And if you see anything that doesn't look right, don't walk, run the opposite direction. Don't let your guard down, and you'll be okay. You'll be just fine. And so Barney wanted me to be on the boat at 3:30 a.m. because that's when we'd start loading passengers and fill the bait tank and all of that kind of stuff. And there was a full-time deckhand, and I don't remember his name. I wish I did, but I don't.
Yeah.
Anyway, I started working as a pinhead, and I worked that whole summer on that boat with Barney, and he took me under his wing. I think he saw the passion that I had.
Yeah.
I think he may have recognized some capabilities that I might have had.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
he thought, I think this kid's going to be okay if we show him the right way to do all of this.
Yes.
And he did. And he educated me on the mechanics of the boat. It had one single GMC 671 diesel engine.
That's hilarious.
And
That's
said,
what the Redondo Special had.
And he said, if it quits, we're screwed, so we got to keep it running, and here's how we do it, and we need to change filters regularly, and we got to do this and flush that. And he had me down in the engine room with him doing all of that stuff, and how to work on the capstan and make sure that the anchor could always come up from the bottom and all of that kind of stuff. So then, of course, I went back to school. And during the winter, I'd go down on weekends when the boat wasn't running, and I'd help them with maintenance.
Yeah.
Sanding railings.
Boy, we're on the same track, you and I.
All of that same kind of stuff.
Yeah.
And learning more about the boat
Yes.
than about fishing at that point.
Right.
Well, for some reason, and I'll never know why, because I never asked him, I got the impression he probably didn't want to talk about it. He had some kind of a falling out with Norm Hagen, who was the owner of Norm's Landing.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was over money or something he needed for the boat, and wasn't.
He never divulged that.
Never divulged it. All I knew is that he called me one time and he said, "You don't have to come down here and work on the boat anymore because I'm no longer captain of the Valencia 3. But I have your number, and we'll see what happens."
Were you heartbroken?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This, I was already salivating over the next season, which was, not coming until springtime. And so, I guess a couple of months went by and the phone rang one day and my mom said, "It's for you. It's this Barney guy." I said, "Yeah, Barney, what's up?" He says, "I got a new gig." Didn't call it gig then, it wasn't popular, but I got a new boat. It's called the Raymond B. and it doesn't run out of any of the big landings. Norm's, Redondo, Pier Point Landing, of course, was the big operator back then with its TV show, Let's Go Fishing, and all of that. He said, I'm going to run this.
Was this Pyramid Cove? No.
No, He said, I'm going to run this boat off of a dock way in the back channel in Wilmington.
I'll be darned.
Over by freighter and tanker terminals, that it just happens to be a dock that's there. It's a municipal dock, and they're not going to charge me anything to run out of it. And I can leave the boat there overnight, so we don't have to be, would you be interested in working for me? Hell yes.
Sign me up.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So I did. And the first time I ever walked aboard the Raymond B, I thought, oh dear.
Why? It looked like it was going to sink?
It was made out of plywood, and I'm not even sure it was marine plywood.
Oh, God, Carl.
And it had a little cabin with a grill and a head, and then a flying bridge. Very minimal. And it was a mess. But Barney was in the process of upgrading it.
Yeah.
As he was wont to do with everything that he ever had anything to do with.
Yes.
Turns out I was the only deckhand. I wasn't a pinhead anymore. I was the guy.
Oh, wow.
And I'm 13 years old. And I'm thinking, oh, this is very unusual. I don't know anybody that's 13 years old and is a first deckhand on a regular sport fishing boat.
Right. And I got to guess your salary for the day was, what year was this?
1957.
Wow. I'm going to say $8.
10.
Okay. Yeah.
I thought I'd died and gone to heaven.
Absolutely. I remember when I went from 12 to 16, I thought, oh my God.
What am I going to do with all this money? Oh my God, yeah. And of course there was side money.
Right. That's where you hope to make it.
Exactly. And there was no galley girl on that, and so there was no hot food. Even though there was a grill, we never used it.
Yeah.
The passengers that rode that boat at that time were pretty sketchy. I mean, Wilmington in itself was pretty rough and tough town, and Barney was saying this is going to be a different clientele than we had over at Norm's Landing.
Yeah.
But he said, once we leave the dock and their main
they're focused on catching
fishing,
fish.
And they're going to need more help than you're used to over on the Valencia 3.
Yeah.
Gear setup and techniques and how to
was there rod rentals and that kind of thing in those
No.
times? No. So the guy had to brand who knows what kind of tackle they had, right?
And there were guys that were shared. Sometimes 3 guys showed up and shared one outfit.
Wow.
I mean, because that's just, and it was, I don't know what we were charging for a fare, but it wasn't much.
Yeah.
And there were no tickets. It just,
Yeah, right.
take some cash and come on board, that kind of a deal.
Wow.
So I did that for all of 57, and it was a really good job for me. And it got me that much closer to Barney, who now figured that we were a team.
Yes.
And I could see that probably more than likely in the future, wherever he went, I was probably going to end up. Because we got along famously.
Yes.
And I worked my ass off. I really did.
Yeah.
I really worked hard at it. The following year, 1958, he ran the same boat, the Raymond B, but we moved over to Belmont Pier, which was a much better deal. Maybe a little bit higher class clientele down there in Long Beach. The mooring thing was a bit of an issue, and I didn't like it because you couldn't clean the boat at the end of the day with fresh water like you could at a proper landing.
Yeah.
You had to use salt water for everything, and it was harder to keep the boat clean.
Yeah.
The Raymond B was never that clean anyway. I mean, it was a scow. And Barney was saying, be patient, because someday we'll be moving up.
Yeah.
This is just a temporary deal, and it works really good for me right now because I don't have any partners or anything. I'm running this for the owner. He takes a very small percentage, so we're going to do okay here.
Yeah.
And so we did. I worked 6 days a week on that boat. And then I always took a weekday off, usually a Wednesday or something like that, Tuesday, Wednesday, when there were light loads.
Yeah.
And I don't know what he did I think he had rotating people that would come in and
they'd call somebody and say, hey, come on.
Yeah, come on. I'll slip you $15 or something.
Yeah.
But at home, my father was very maritime. My brother was very maritime. My brother was a ham radio operator, and he always had a marine radio at our house. listening to what was going on around the harbor and in the Catalina Channel and whatever. And I'm there at home one day. I had just got a haircut and come back from the barber, and I'm listening to the radio, and I hear a mayday from the Raymond B.
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah.
Wow.
And the mayday was going down by the stern. We've sprung a leak. We can't fix it. We're going back. I've got a fairly large group of passengers on board. I've moved them all up to the bow. We've moved all the gear up there that we can.
You're listening to Barney's voice?
Yeah.
You must
He's talking to
been
the Coast Guard.
Freaking out.
Absolutely.
He's on Channel 16, was it?
Yeah, Channel 16. And I'm trying to figure out, well, where is he?
Yeah.
You know, and he finally said, I guess he'd been probably fishing at the Horseshoe Kelp or Point Furman or something. He says, I'm headed for Cabrillo Beach. And right then and there, I took off on a dead run, and I ran from 10th Street to 22nd Street, and I mean, all the way out to Cabrillo Beach.
Yeah.
and down, and sure enough, I got there just as he was bringing it in, stern first, and I saw it kind of hit stern first and then kind of settle in, and I heard him gun the engines up, which were still operable, to push it up as far as he could on the beach, and then me and a couple lifeguards started helping people and their gear off through the surf, which was going just fine, and we got almost everybody off except Barney. When the thing broached, it got sideways, and then it started getting beat up, and it started coming apart.
Yeah.
Finally convinced Barney to get off, because
he was going down with the ship.
I think he was going down with the ship,
oh,
you know,
my
and
God.
he still had stuff he wanted to retrieve or whatever, and we finally managed to get him off the boat.
Was he fighting you to get? Or was
he was reluctant.
Yeah.
But he realized after it broached, you know, we're fighting a losing battle here or whatever.
Right.
Oh, crap. So anyway.
Poor guy.
Yeah, I mean, I was heartbroken. And
yeah.
Good news, nobody was hurt.
Right.
Everybody got all their gear back.
Oh, that's good.
Yeah, maybe it was a little saltwater wet, but I mean, they got all their fishing tackle
survived
and whatever. Everybody survived.
Thank God.
And eventually, I guess a day or two later, a marine rescue thing came out and towed it off the beach, and it's like 90% sunk, but they towed it to one of the boatyards right over here. Hauled it out and immediately recognized it was unsalvageable.
Yeah.
There was nothing that could be done.
Yeah.
It was a pretty dicey piece to start with.
That's what I was thinking.
After a couple of days in the surf, it was junk. So, well, that was the end of that deal. So Barney said, I don't know what I'm going to do, but you need to go get a job, because this is early in the season.
Yeah.
This is like second, third week of summer.
Oh, geez.
So he said, I happen to know a guy, a good captain named Joe Phillips. Little Joe Phillips is what they call him. He runs a boat called the Star Angler out of 22nd Street Landing. It's a 2 a.m. boat, and they're looking for a second deckhand. If you'd like, I'll put in a good word for you. I said, man, I'd really appreciate that. That'd be great. I mean, I live in San Pedro, 22nd Street Landing.
Yeah.
It seems like...
Boy, and that says a lot about Barney, too,
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
He just lost his boat, and he's looking out for you.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And right away, I mean, as soon as it was determined that the Raymond B was unsalvageable,
he's looking
to get me a gig.
That's awesome.
And I go, oh, wow. So, okay. So I made an appointment to meet the boat when it came in one day. And I talked to the skipper, Joe Phillips, and the deckhand, a guy named Larry Goldfarb, both good guys. And they said, yeah, we'd love to put you on as second deckhand, and this is what we'll pay you, and 6 days a week if that works for you. We leave at 2 a.m., so I want you here at 1. Not a problem, we'll do that. It was a 65-foot displacement hull boat with a fly bridge, but a galley.
Better than the Raymond B? Night and day?
Night and day.
Okay.
Yeah. Wood hull, lap strake
Yeah.
type wooden hull and all of that. It had been in San Diego originally, and it had been brought up here. And like I said, it was a 2 a.m. boat. Had an open fly bridge, so we'd board the passengers. Well, first of all, I'd get here at 1, fill the bait tank, start up the grill in the galley, check for everything in the heads to make sure there was a roll of toilet paper or whatever.
Yeah.
And then at 1:30, I would start checking the passengers on board. And Little Joe and Goldfarb would show up about 5 minutes to 2, jump on board.
Take off.
We'd leave, head over to the bait receiver. I'd load the bait, because Goldfarb was already down in the rack. And this boat had a bunk room in the back, and it had a crew bunk room up in the front. And, so and then as soon as we'd clear Angel's Gate Light, after I cleaned up after loading bait,
the captain would say, "Hey, you're driving." Is that right?
Oh, absolutely. And we had no autopilot, of course.
Right.
So
Which keeps you awake,
he'd
kind
give
of.
me a compass bearing and say, "Wake me up."
Good luck.
And the deal always was, whenever we get to where we're going, and we're using pretty much visual bearings at this time to figure out.
Did you have a radar?
No.
Yeah. Heck no.
We had a depth recorder, which was one of those scratchy things, you know,
with the stylus.
Yeah, exactly. And that was it, and a UHF radio, and that was it. You know?
Wow.
So he said, you know, when we're getting close, if there's somebody around, have them yell down to the crew bunk room to wake me up, and if not, just pull back on the throttles, and I'll be up there immediately.
Yeah.
And so I did, and I did that every trip 6 days a week, and we'd fish as far as Santa Barbara Island, San Nicolas.
Really?
Yeah, I mean, you know, when things were not
clicking at cat
or even San Clemente Island, you know, we'd go. They'd go the distance.
Yeah.
And being a 2 a.m. boat, they could get just about anywhere.
What time did you get back into the docks? 6, 7 at night?
Between 5 and 6 p.m.
Yeah, man.
And back then, we never cleaned the boat until after we got back to the dock, where we had access to fresh water and all of that kind of stuff. So if we got back at 6, you know, I scrubbed the boat from stem to stern, usually finished by about 7 p.m.
Yeah.
Walk home, have dinner, take a bath. We didn't have a shower in our little house. Catch a couple hours of sleep and get back up at 1 o'clock in the morning or 12:45 and do it all again.
Oh my God.
And it was magical.
Yeah.
It was great.
Yeah.
It was wonderful.
I'll bet you saw some wonderful fishing.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
We had albacore back then.
Yeah.
And you know, white sea bass and black sea bass that were still catchable and landable at that time. And yeah, it was, you know, it was crazy. And a guy named Frank Hall had the sharpshooter here, which was the alpha boat, you know. And every once in a while, if we didn't have enough passengers to leave the dock, Hall would let me ride with them as a second or third deckhand, just to do it, you know, just to have an extra hand around to help gaff fish or whatever, and paid nothing, but at least, you know, it was an overnight boat, and I got to do that and learn more about that kind of fishing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it was great. That was 1958. 1959, I did the same boat because Barney hadn't picked up anything yet.
So what is Barney doing?
Barney was running the Voyager over at Redondo Pier to the
barge?
Sacramento barge.
Yeah, right.
And there was a second barge that I don't remember the name of.
California, maybe?
I think it was probably the California.
Yeah.
And he was doing that deal.
Yeah.
All day long, back and forth, back and forth. And of course, they didn't need a deckhand for that. So, I mean, I was still on the Star Angler. And I did another season with Joe Phillips and Larry Goldfarb. And it was great. Then in 1960, Barney called me again. And he said, I got another boat. It's the GW running out of Redondo Pier. This was before King Harbor was finished out. And so again, it was moor inside the breakwater, but then drive around to the pier, load off the pier, half-day boat, 6 a.m. to noon, 1 p.m. to 6 p.m.
Yeah.
And it was a gold mine because, first of all, we ran mostly with full loads every trip.
Oh, wow. And full with how many people?
50 people.
And was it wall to wall?
Oh,
there's no, I know.
It was the
Actimon.
epitome of a cattle boat.
Yep.
65-foot boat, 50 people. I mean, you could just barely squeeze them out. Sometimes I had to go kind of pry people apart to get a youngster in there or whatever.
Yeah.
And the side money was awesome.
Yeah.
You know, twice a day.
Yeah.
And the way we did the split, 50% went to Barney, 25% went to me, 25% went to the galley girl. Perfectly equitable. And that was above and beyond my salary, which by now had zoomed all the way up to like $25 a day.
Wow.
I mean,
yeah, exactly.
It's still my heart, you know. Holy crap. So he invited me to come over and be the deckhand on that. And again, I was the only deckhand. And I did that 6 days a week, all summer, and then weekends in the spring and fall, all of 1960 and all of 1961. And I turned 18 years old in November of 1961, joined the Coast Guard, and spent the next 5 years on active duty.
Now, you left your job here at 22nd Street to go work with Barney. So
Absolutely.
As much as you were enjoying yourself here, Barney was your guy.
It wasn't, for me, it wasn't about the 2 trips a day with the side money.
It was loyalty.
It was Barney Barnes, my hero and mentor, with whom I shared so much through so many times, difficult and otherwise. He wants me, I'm his. If he had said, I'm not going to pay you at all, you'll be working for side money, I'd have still gone over.
Yeah.
Because that's the relationship that we had.
Did he have that handkerchief in his back pocket?
Always.
Do you remember that?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, okay. I mean, you and I've never talked about that, right?
And he always wore bell-bottom dungarees.
He did.
Navy issue. He bought them over here at Union War Surplus on 6th Street.
Yeah.
And that was required, attire for the deckhand as well. Yeah. We had the high hip boots at that time, and nobody had ever heard anything like Grundens or anything like that.
Right.
So it was magical, and we fished mostly Santa Monica Bay up to Rocky Point and around maybe to Point Vicente.
You're catching massive amounts of calico bass, yellowtail.
Yeah.
How about white sea bass fishing?
Not much.
Not much in those days.
Not much. And of course, all we had then, we had no squid ever.
Yeah.
And we had very little sardine. It was almost entirely anchovies. And some days it was pinhead anchovies.
Yeah, I remember. Which is great for chum, but man, trying to put a hook in it and catch something.
Two eyeballs and a wiggle.
Yeah.
Yeah. But what it does teach you is how to fly line.
It sure does.
Next to nothing.
Yeah, right.
And when passengers would give up because it was too difficult to get a bait away from the boat, I'd pick up my little true line rod with my 15-pound test monofilament and the heavy guides that gave it a good whip, and I could whip a decent size anchovy, out there enough to get in the zone and get bit. And then, of course, I'd hand off to the passengers, which was good for their experience and good for the tip jar.
Yeah, darn right. The pickle jar, right?
Yeah, exactly. The pickle jar. And there were no set fees for anything then. When you clean fish, which was just gilling and gutting at that time.
You'd size the person up and say, you look like you can afford $3.
Yeah, I mean,
don't worry about it, kid.
Exactly.
That kind of thing,
exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And there was always enough in the jar at the end of the day to justify everything that it had.
Everybody was happy.
You'd get the occasional butthole that, you clean 5 or 10 fish for him, and he sees the jar there, and he just walks away. And okay, well, that's going to happen. Human nature.
Yeah.
And like Barney would say all the time, just get over it. Don't let that bother you.
He told you that.
Oh yeah.
And that's a great lesson in life, right?
He said, if you get agitated every time anybody does anything disrespectful or whatever, your life is going to be misery. He said, focus on the good.
Like, I don't know who said it, but I think Lou Holt at Notre Dame. I think he said life is 10% of what happens to you and 90% of how you take it.
How you deal with it.
Yeah.
And that was the kind of lesson that Barney Barnes
life
taught
lesson
me all the time.
Yeah.
So after I joined the Coast Guard, I distinctly remember the very last time I ever spent any time with Barney. It was in 1963, 2 years after I had worked for him. And I remember it distinctly because I was at his house with him and his wife at that time, Lee, and it was the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated.
Oh my God, 1963, November 22nd.
Bingo.
Yeah.
I remember that date forever for that very reason.
Yeah.
And Lee, his wife, had been watching TV while he and I and my girlfriend, who eventually became my first wife, were having a great time with Barney, reminiscing about the good old days and whatever. And I remember Lee coming into where we were saying, "You're not going to believe this, but somebody just shot the president."
Oh my God.
And we were all just gobsmacked by the situation, and that pretty much ended our little conversation, because at that point everybody wanted to focus on the news and whatever. I did speak with him on the phone a couple of times after that.
So what? Oh, the 1963.
63,
yeah.
Right. Probably 66 or so. I got out of the Coast Guard in 1966. And probably right after that, when I moved back to Southern California, somebody gave me his phone number. He had moved by then. And I called him. We had a nice chat over the phone. And yeah, well, for sure we need to get together, but he's running a boat over there now, probably the Redondo Special, I would assume.
Yeah.
I think he had moved on from the GW by then. And anyway, that's the last conversation we ever had. And I always wondered what happened to him. And then when I contacted you several years ago, and you told me how his life had kind of evolved from that point on, and that at some point, he pretty much was the guy at Redondo Sport Fishing.
Yeah, he was.
I was so pleased. I was so thrilled. And then when you told me he had passed away, because I'm thinking, I got to get together with Barney.
Yeah, what a reunion,
we got so
right?
much to talk about. And you said,
and so much to thank him. I mean, I can tell you're very grateful to him. I can see that. And when you get a person in your life like that and they have that kind of profound, long-lasting impact on your life, it's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And you're tearing up.
I mean, yeah, it chokes me up when I think about him. It really does. He was that much of a positive influence on my life. And I even loved when he'd go off, because it taught me that everybody's got the line. And
That's right.
You cross the line. Maybe for some people the line's here, for some people the line's here, but it works. And when you cross Barney's line,
oh my God.
You better get ready, boy.
He was a boxer earlier in his life, right?
Yes, he was.
I don't remember where or how.
Golden Gloves.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Yeah.
But I do remember him talking about that.
He was very pugnacious.
Yes, yes. Did you ever see him come to blows with anybody? I never did.
No.
But I saw him blow his cork a few times.
Oh, yeah.
I remember, I forget who it was, I think it was my brother, went in with a dipper, and we had squid that day, and Barney goes, dip down in there, and Paul pulled it up, and those squid unloaded in his face, and he had these glasses on. He took the glasses off, and all you saw were these two, and that handkerchief that Barney had all the time. He was, I can't use the words he was using, but he was swearing and trying to wipe all this ink off his face. And I was trying not to laugh, but it was comical. And, there's so many great moments with Barney. Same thing with me, Carl. He took me under his wing. I was about 12. I was on the Redondo Special. The deckhand's name was Howard Warbays. There was another guy named Mike Bowen. And it was Howard who first approached me. And, same as you, like, oh my God, I get to ride into the back on the boat?
Yeah.
And I get to scrub the rotten anchovies off the deck while these mere mortals are walking by. And it was just the greatest thing. And then Barney, he took me under his wing. My brother Paul and I'm tearing up. And we worked on the Redondo Special with him for many years. John Dipley came over there and ran the Redondo Special. But then Barney bought a little commercial boat, and it was called the Thunderfish. And he said, you and your brother are now the captains of this commercial boat. And we're like, what? And he's like, yeah, this is it. And we ran out of the Portofino Inn, and we fished mostly. We went out and tried to catch some rockcod at Catalina, and we were just not sharp enough, I think. So I looked at my brother and I said, see this way out here, this Tanner Bank and Cortez Bank? I think we could catch fish. And so I remember, right by the west end, we'd go into the west end of Catalina, turn our lights on, make some squid, and then continue on our journey out to Tanner Bank. And we were getting a ton of fish, a ton and a half. We were making money. Barney was making money. We were hauling for quality seafood. And it was fantastic. Really, just such a magical time. And we'd go to Barney's house and his wife Edie, and they were lovely and so accommodating, and those were special times. But I can't remember what it was. Barney was on the phone and got angry with somebody and started to go into, like, he lost it and the 4-letter words were coming out of his mouth, and he's trying to swear, but Edie's got her hand over his mouth, trying to cover his mouth and say, Barney, no.
I can see that, yeah. See, and that would have been the difference between Edie and Lee, because Lee would only fire him up.
Oh, like, don't take that from that guy.
Oh, yeah. You're going to let him talk to you like that? Oh, geez, no, don't. Oh, no, this is not going to end well, I can tell. Oh, yeah.
Oh,
now,
my
Barney,
God.
Russell Hewlett Barney Barnes was my first and in many ways most important mentor of life.
Besides your father. You mentioned that.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. My dad was my hero forever.
Yeah, me too. Same thing.
And taught me about a lot of things, but not the same things that Barney taught me about.
Yeah, right.
Barney taught me about
life,
the world at large.
Yes.
Outside our little bubble here in San Pedro and Long Beach. A lot about human nature, a lot about how to deal with people. And even though he would fire off on people, rarely would he do it on passengers.
Yeah.
He would do it on, we carried, like every boat, we carried deadheads now and then.
Yeah, we did too.
That came aboard for nothing.
That was part of the game.
It was part of the game.
And just in case somebody's listening, they were there to help with the fish count.
Yep.
And mostly to win the jackpot.
Absolutely.
Right? Those were the days where you talk about like, hey, I think Jack's got the golden eye, right? Did you use that term?
Yep.
Yep. And the golden eye meant, for everybody out there listening, the golden eye meant the jackpot fish.
That's right.
And the crew kept it, and then we'd split it.
That's it.
Whether that's ethical or not, I'm not justifying. I'm just telling you, telling everybody the way it was.
And the way he justified it was the biggest fish won the jackpot.
That's right.
If the deadhead didn't catch the biggest fish,
we don't take it.
That's it.
That's right.
Then somebody else is going to win.
That's right.
And the only time that I would really see him get fired off is part of being a deadhead was you got to help other passengers. You're the expert.
Yes.
And if you're not taking any fish home, hook and hand off.
Right.
They don't need to know who you are or what you're here for or whatever. You know, unless it's a jackpot fish. Like, you're here to help the whole operation.
That's right. Not pushing people out of the stern and trying to get in the corner.
And if a deadhead would cross that line, if he'd end up in the port corner shoving people out of the way or get in a tangle and cut somebody off or what, boy, he would go off.
Really?
Time. And that would be the last time that guy ever deadheaded on that boat.
Right.
So I've seen that side of him for sure. And I kind of, be honest with you, I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah.
Because it taught me that everybody's got their limit.
Everybody's got their breaking point.
And what it taught me is when you're dealing with somebody and you're getting up to that line, you better back off.
Yeah.
Time to just reconsider and take a couple of deep breaths and maybe take a couple of steps back and see if we can't, reach some detente here or something.
Yeah, another life lesson.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. I saw Barney, and I don't know if he had something else going on in his life or what, but we were anchoring, and this was like right along somewhere up near Rocky Point, and a guy who had no idea what he was doing was digging in the bait tank and getting all the dead bait, and we had just anchored, and the guy threw the bait off, and Barney was up, and he saw that, and he goes, God, pull the anchor, he just flipped out, because he was afraid the fish were going to follow that bait or whatever. He just was. And so I saw that side of him. Rarely, though. Most of the time, he was that old Southern kind of gentleman. In fact, he would, he'd like, hey, boys, it's nice to see you. He signed for me. We had something. There was a guy named Rick Effinger. I don't know if you know Rick, but he owns Marina Del Rey Sport Fishing.
I've heard the name.
So he was a senior at Bishop Montgomery High School when I was a junior. And at 11:30 every day, I saw Rick in his truck driving out. And I'm like, I'm stuck here till 2:30. So I approached him. I said, hey, what are you doing, by the way? And he goes, I've got work experience. What the hell is work experience? Get Barney to sign. He can sign for you, and then you go down on the boat in the afternoon, and you get credits at school for that. And I'm like,
really?
You got to be kidding me. This is made for me. I'm in. So I did the same thing, and I'd go down there. Sometimes I would, go on the boat, but sometimes the boat didn't run.
Yeah.
So I would go home, take a nap, and be ready for playing street hockey for 3 hours. After that, and the counselor, how are you doing on the boat? Oh, I'm learning a lot about navigation, celestial navigation. I'm home taking a nap.
Sure.
But Barney signed those papers for me, and so I have so many great memories. And then running that commercial boat, the Thunderfish, we had a lot of fun doing that. But there were some times where we got into some trouble and had to call him. And, you know, Barney, we're out of fuel. We called the Coast Guard. I was on a first name basis with the Coast Guard at that point. Like, oh, where are you broken down today, Phil? And Carl, they didn't charge you in those days.
No.
And there was, I don't know if this, there was one time we broke down. We ran from Redondo to the dumping grounds fishing albacore. So coming back, we ran out of fuel, of course.
Of course.
Yeah, I mean, that's a long ways.
Yeah.
And we called the Coast Guard. The guys came. They picked us up. And so it was like in the middle, like 3 o'clock in the morning. We tied up, and then they're towing us. And then so at daybreak, my brother goes, look at the cutter. Look at what they're doing. And they had jigs out. They were trolling for albacore.
Yeah.
I go, I love it. These guys are all right, man.
Well, now you know why I joined the Coast Guard.
Yeah, I do.
Yeah, because Barney and I had a couple of situations where we needed their assistance.
Yeah.
And they were right there, and never any questions, and no judgment of any kind.
Yeah, right.
Just, we're here to help. You know?
Yes.
But, you know, the things that Barney taught me about boating and seamanship, he wasn't satisfied for me just to work the deck.
Yeah.
He wanted to teach me how to run the boat.
That's great.
And I remember the first time he had taught me about a compass and how you keep a compass bearing course. But I'll never forget the first time he actually put me on the wheel. Okay, here's where we're going. Our running time is about 47 minutes. He says, here's your compass bearing. He said, I'm going to go down and get a cup of coffee and a breakfast sandwich. And if there's a problem, just pull back the throttle and I'll be right here.
Yeah.
And he left me alone in the wheelhouse at 12 years old.
Wow.
Driving this. Now, you can't do that anymore.
Yeah, I know.
And rightfully so, probably.
Yeah.
But in retrospect,
I know.
It turned me from being a guy that helped on the deck to being a guy that if something happened to Barney, I could get us back.
Yeah.
And he encouraged me to get my radio license. And I remember the first time that he had me actually talk on the radio.
Oh, right.
I mean, I thought,
me too.
oh, I'm such hot stuff.
Yeah,
here,
me
man.
too.
I don't even try to get near me. I haven't got time for you. I mean, it was,
because the jobs that your friends in high school or grammar school at this time had, I mean, you're on the water seeing spectacles of nature and these giant fish, and these guys are flipping burgers, and you feel like you hit the jackpot.
And to be honest, at that time, I don't think any of my friends actually had a job.
Yeah, probably
of any
not,
kind.
right?
I mean, 12, 13 years old,
right.
No. And I remember I had a good friend that lived across the street, a kid named Joe DeMeglio, lived right across the street from us. His mother would not let him ride his bike with us from our house out to Point Furman, where we like to go down on the rocks and whatever, because it was too dangerous.
Yeah.
And here I am, driving a sport fishing boat to Catalina Island or something.
Well, not only that, and I think people would just, they may be listening to this now and thinking, what kind of advice was your father giving you, saying if you get in, you see something, just run. But there's something about that turns a young kid into a man that I think we don't get anymore. I'm not recommending that everybody send their kids out, but I was that way with my kids, pretty much. Like, look, you gotta pay attention, because otherwise they live in this bubble and they get to be 18 or 20 and they don't have any idea how to deal with situations like that.
Yeah.
So it's a weird line you have to walk, but I would err on like your father. I think that teaching your son, your daughter, here's how you pay attention. After
I was honorably discharged from the Coast Guard in 1966, I got into my other love in life, which was motorsports. Drag racing in particular. Even in the last year in the Coast Guard, I had acquired and ran a little injected fuel dragster up in Northern California. I was stationed for the last 2 years of my Coast Guard duty in Monterey.
Yeah.
And so I would run little drag strips up Salinas, Half Moon Bay, Fremont.
Do you still do that, or?
Yeah, well, it evolved into a career eventually.
Really?
Yeah, when I got out of the Coast Guard and came back to Southern California, I took a job with a high-performance parts manufacturer in Long Beach. very shortly went from warehouse manager to general manager, and became heavily involved in the automotive high performance industry, and at the same time racing my little car, which evolved into driving a front engine top fuel dragster, and then we made the change to rear engine dragsters, and I ended up running very competitively on a national and international
That's
basis.
fantastic.
So,
and you ever out at Pomona doing the
I won
the drags
I
out
won
there?
top fuel eliminator at the NHRA Winter Nationals at Pomona in 1972.
Wow.
Which was my first big victory, and then spent the next year on tour with my partner, a guy named Mike Cool, running all over the country, and drove top fuel dragsters until 1974, when I retired from driving. Remained involved in motorsport, worked for a trade association called the Speed Equipment Manufacturers Association for a couple of years, and then spent 25 years as a vice president of the National Hot Rod Association.
Really? God, I wish I could remember. You know, I was out at the Pomona Drags, and there's a guy, and he is really into fishing. He's got boats down at San Quintin. I'll have to, after this podcast, I'll find his name and shoot it to you. And he has like several drag. He's all in. I bet you guys know each other.
I'm sure we would.
Yeah. So your drag racing and the fishing, those are your two loves, it sounds like.
And the drag racing is the kind of thing that you can't do halfway.
Right.
If you're going to go drag racing at the top level, it's your whole
You're
life.
all in.
So for 30 years, I didn't drop a bait in the ocean.
Oh, okay. Got you.
And then...
And you probably... Maybe you didn't have time to miss it, right? Yeah,
no.
You were just consumed by this new career.
And even after I quit racing, I also did racing at the Bonneville Salt Flats in Utah, land speed racing. It's not competitive, it's all about speed and all of that kind of stuff, records. And I did that until just a couple of years ago. But at some point, I'm traveling all over the country and eventually responsible for NHRA's international relations, traveling all over the world as well. Didn't have time to go fishing.
Right.
But slowly but surely, starting with like a half-day trip, you know what, I'm just going to do it. I'm going to take a day off and I'm going to go down there and get it. And then it was a 3/4-day trip, Sport King. And then it was a full-day trip, and then I did an overnight trip out of San Diego, fishing for albacore, and it was like, okay.
Got the bug again.
Here we go. Here we go. I'm going to have to find a better balance now between motorsports and fishing.
Yeah.
But I was to the point in my career where I had accrued 4 or 5 weeks of vacation, and so now I did my first long-range trip on the Royal Polaris in 1996.
Okay.
And
96. Who was on there then? Was Rollo on there then?
Rollo taught me
the
first of everything that I learned about long-range fishing.
Really?
Steve Loomis was driving the boat. Unfortunately, a very close personal friend of mine, who was the photographer at the National Hot Rod Association, a guy named Leslie Lovett, had a heart attack and died on the last day of that trip.
Oh my God. You guys went together?
Oh yeah. And we shared a stateroom together,
Oh,
and it was the big fishing. He was a hardcore trout fisherman, but I had introduced him to the local stuff, and then when I told him I was going to do this 5-day trip,
he's in.
You know, he didn't even ask me. He just came over to my little garage one day when I was working on fishing tackle and said, "Guess what?
I'm going with
on the
you."
trip, and they're putting us in the same stateroom."
Oh man!
Yeah.
And what a tragic. Did he pass away at night or?
No, it was the last day of the trip, and we were fishing bluefin tuna offshore. Steve Loomis had just run over a school of fish, and they were nice 50 to 80 pound fish. I caught my first big bluefin tuna, 86 pounds.
Yeah.
And Rollo Hein and the guy that runs the boat now, Roy Rose.
Yeah, Roy.
Were the two.
He was there. Roy was there.
He was the deckhand as well. And I remember Roy Rose was on the tank when we were coming into this stop, and I had just purchased this Shimano TLD 3 2-speed with 60-pound test monofilament line, and I remember Steve Loomis saying, these are big fish that we're rolling up on. I don't want anything under 60-pound test in the water. And so I grabbed that outfit. It's the first time I had used it on the whole trip.
Yeah.
And I went back, and I remember Roy Rose scooped this nice, fat, greenback mackerel out. And he said, hand me your hook. And he hooked it. I think he shoulder hooked it or something. He said, run up to the bow. And he said, underhand this thing gently off the port side. And let this thing swim. And just do it.
Yeah.
So I ran up to the bow and I underhanded that thing out, and it swam about 20 feet. And it was game on. And I remember.
Was there a big boil on the bait, or?
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
And I slipped the thing in gear, and I took the slack out and set the hook, and this thing took off, and there was a spray behind the line. And I was just. And it was probably not more than an hour later that I was standing at the bait tank getting a bait, and my friend Leslie had just got a sardine and had walked over to the rail and had cast it out. And I remember I heard this thump on the deck, and I thought, what the hell is that? And I remembered the deckhand on the bait tank. I said, what the hell is it? And I turned around, and he was laying on the deck. He dropped his rod. And he was shaking, and I went, and I mean, every crew member, Loomis, Roy Rose, Rollo Hein, on him instantaneously.
Yeah.
It turned out that we had a medical doctor aboard.
Oh, shoot.
Who was an ER doctor.
So he's seen it all.
He's
ER doctors have seen it all.
And he has just landed a nice bluefin tuna, and he'd gone up topside to have a bottle of cold water and regain his hydrate and whatever. And he saw my friend go down, and he was on him instantaneously, and they had all the stuff, the bags, and they're doing CPR and whatever. And I remember Rollo saying to me, reel his gear in and rack it, and he said, and I want you to help me out. I want you to help getting all the passengers wound in, stow their gear, and get everybody in the galley.
While they're working on
it. He said, you don't want to be here.
Yeah.
And okay, so I did exactly what he said, and I got everybody in the galley and whatever. And I remember about 10 minutes later, the doctor came in and he said, I'm sorry.
Oh.
And I was just, God. It's funny though, I took a picture of him fastened to a tuna.
Yeah.
About 20 minutes before he dropped dead.
Yeah.
Last day of the trip, last couple hours of the trip.
Yeah.
We've had a marvelous trip. We've caught big yellowtail at Cedros Island. We've, best fishing trip I had ever had, and certainly the best one he'd ever had.
Yeah.
And I took this picture of him, and his rod's all bent over, and he has got a smile from ear to ear, and the sun is shining, and it took a long time. It took years of looking at that picture in my little office at home.
So you kept this?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah. To come to grips with the fact that none of us are getting out of this deal alive.
No.
I mean, it's only a matter of sooner or later.
Yep, I know what you're going to say, and I agree.
And I've known people who have laid in hospital beds, wired up to machines for days, weeks, months on end in pain. I've watched people.
What a way to go.
He 1 minute he's having the time of his life, and the next minute he's off to wherever he goes into the here and after.
Right.
And I look back on it now, and I realize that wasn't the tragedy that I had felt.
Yeah.
And I mean, it was normal, and that my reaction was as it should have been at the time. But in retrospect, God, sign me up for that program.
Yeah, there may be only one other way to go, but we can't talk about it on this show.
Well, exactly.
But there was a priest up at Bishop Montgomery High School, and when something would be bugging me, and I'd talk to him, he'd say, "Hey, don't take life so seriously. You're never going to get out alive."
It's not going to happen.
And so he goes, "There's nickel and dime issues, and most of them are nickel and dime. In fact, they all are. Just relax." So you're right. I mean, what a way to go, right?
Absolutely.
I mean,
and
he had to pick, because we've all seen the people. I've been up in hospitals day in and day out. People are suffering, and
and he had some health problems. He had a heart condition and that he was taking some pretty serious medication for and whatever. I don't know what his future would have been, but it probably wouldn't have been all that stellar.
Yeah.
And you know, for him to have gone out that way, I look back on it now and I think undoubtedly that was meant to be. I believe to some degree in karma.
Yeah.
And if that was the way he was destined to leave this earth, God, sign me up.
I was going to say.
Sign me up.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, it sure beats the hell out of being in a hospital.
And the crew handled that situation so well. They had a body bag. They put him in a body bag. They got him up topside before anybody was let out of the galley. And they went in, and I remember Steve Loomis saying, you know, we're going to leave now. The trip is over. We're done. And unfortunately, our friend didn't make it.
Passed away.
And then later that night, you know, Loomis had to make reports to the Coast Guard and all of that, and he needed a lot of information, his address, phone number, driver's license number, any medications that he had brought with him, you know, for the inquiry that undoubtedly happens. And while I was doing that and gathering all of his stuff and packaging it up, you know, I remember the doctor that had attended to him, the passenger, came, knocked on the stateroom door, and he said, "Can I come in for a minute?" And he sat down and had a talk with me, and it changed my perspective on the whole thing right there and then. He said,
"What did he say?"
He said, he never knew what hit him. He never suffered. He never felt any pain. He said, I watched it happen.
Yeah.
And he said it was that fast. He said 1 second he's alive and the next minute he's not. So if you think that maybe he hit his head on the deck going down or what, he said no. He had a massive coronary and there was nothing. If he had been in my ER room with me and a whole fleet of nurses,
couldn't have saved him.
It wouldn't have happened.
Yeah.
You know,
your number comes up and
that's it.
Yeah.
And everybody, the crew and the doctor, and they were so helpful and helped me get through one of the most difficult days of my entire life. You know, and I developed a huge respect for those people. And then when Rollo passed away in that terrible accident, and then what happened to Steve Loomis when they pulled his ticket on it. I mean, it was just such a tragedy at every imaginable level. You know? Yeah. But I moved over to the Shogun, and when Sam Patella and Brian Kiyohara bought the American Angler, I had been the Pacific Queen, which had been their boat at the time, was my go-to overnight day-and-a-half boat.
Before they had it, or
while they had the Queen, they got it from McEwen.
Yeah.
And then when they acquired the American Angler, I moved over there, and I've done at least one and as many as 4 long-range trips on the Angler every year since they bought it in 2002.
Really? And you still do?
Still do.
Oh, that's great.
I only have 1 trip there this year because they're booked solid. You know,
if
you didn't book getting off of a trip, and COVID screwed a lot of things up, and that was one of the things is, you know, when you're not a regular anymore and you lose your place in line, even though, you know, I got to say that everybody down there, I love fishing that boat. It's not the biggest boat, it's not the fastest boat, it's not the fanciest boat, but it fishes hard all the time.
Yeah.
And I watch guys like Ray Lopez start as almost a pinhead, and then a deckhand, and now one of the most respected skippers in the fleet.
It's great to see that progression, isn't it? It's also great to see how these guys that you look at, they know how to pin a bait on, they know how to anchor, they know how to do all the stuff that you're required to do on a boat. But when there's an emergency, they know how to do all this other stuff too that you've never seen that before. And then all of a sudden, they're transformed into another being.
Superman.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And I fish a lot of other boats. I fished the XL several times. I fish the Independence a lot now.
Oh, do you?
Well, I started fishing the long trips with them.
Yeah.
Because when you go to Hurricane Bank or Clarion, or you know, and I never got to fish the other Revillagigedo Islands because they had closed them down by that time. But on those long trips, you know, the Indy is just it's the finest fishing platform I've ever been on, and the thought that went through those guys building that boat, being fishermen, and knowing you really need a tackle spot assigned for everybody, so you don't have this cluster at the dock with everybody elbowing their way down the gangway to try and get the alpha spot for your one of the few for your tackle box or whatever, and having a little loop next to your tackle box for tying hooks on it.
Well thought out.
All thought out, and being the big boat that it is, when you get into snotty weather coming up the line after a 16-day, boy, it's really nice when you got that big thing plowing through the water.
No doubt.
So I'm doing 2 8-days on the Indy this year, one later this month and one in August. That used to be the John Collins Invitational. John Collins has taught me more about long-range sport fishing than the next 100 people combined.
Really?
Yeah, just another of my great mentors. Yeah. And he's kind of moved over to the Royal Polaris now, and his wife Judy is now retired from the office at the Indy. But I love fishing that boat. I'm doing the 8-day in August, and then I'm doing another 8-day in November on the Angler again, which, by the way, is in the process of being repowered right now.
Oh, great.
Yeah, they've got the level 3 engines.
Yes. And
so they're good to go for the foreseeable future.
Fantastic.
And they're making a lot of upgrades. And I'm so fortunate that I'm at a position in my life where I'm still able to afford and able to physically do those kinds of trips. Because it's what I live for now.
Carl, your story, I mean, I didn't know what to expect here today, and I'll tell you, of all the guests that I've had, you have got to be right at the top of the list. Yeah, I'm not being, well, you're going to buy me lunch.
Well, absolutely.
So that's why I'm saying that. No.
Okay.
Only kidding you.
No.
You don't have to do that.
No, I do have to do that.
I mean, because you and we kind of crossed each other's paths by a few years. You're a little older than me, even though you don't look like it, you rat.
Trust me, I feel like it.
I mean, Barney Barnes having that impact on your life had that impact on my life. I knew Rollo, I knew Frank. I know Frank. All these guys. It's amazing how our paths have crossed, and how whether it was work ethic or whatever, how sport fishing kind of molded us both for the future.
And I attribute a lot of my success in motorsports with my experience.
I'm sure work ethic, right?
Work ethic.
Yeah.
And that started with Barney Barnes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah, I came looking for you at the Fred Hall shows a couple of years, and then, of course, it got canceled in 2020.
Right. And I was off in China for a few years.
Well,
I don't know if you knew that.
I did know that. And I thought, sooner or later, our paths are bound to cross.
Thank God.
And then when I started watching Friedman Adventures, and there was a email address where I could actually contact you.
Right.
I thought, I got to do this. I got to try anyway. And I wasn't put off by the fact that it took a while, because I know you're a very busy guy. And I the only thing I thought was, I don't know whether that message ever really got to you.
Yeah, exactly.
Because in this,
I don't ignore messages, believe me.
In this
world,
I
know what you mean.
Today, world of technology, I'm a very analog guy in an ever more digital world.
Yes.
So you never know for sure.
Yeah, right.
Whether your stuff is getting through or not. And man, when you contacted me, I was just thrilled to the core.
Well, au contraire, it's been such a pleasure. I enjoyed spending this time with you, and I feel like it's weird. I mean, we've known each other for let's see, a little over an hour. And I feel like you and I could have a great friendship. I really do. I feel that way because of these commonalities in our lives.
That feeling is mutual, I can assure you, yeah. And I would raise a toast to Barney with you, but my doctor made me quit drinking a few years ago. So me and my friend Jack Daniels have parted ways. But
well, can we toast to a cup of coffee or something one of these days?
I think that would be a marvelous idea.
Friend. Carl, thank you so much. This has been a memorable podcast and a really wonderful time for me. Thank you.
Thank you.